You have been living with a lie, not the kind of lie someone told you once and you believed. The kind of lie that was built so slowly, so carefully, so deeply into the structure of how you see yourself that it stopped feeling like a lie a long time ago. It feels like the truth.
It feels like reality.
It feels like just the way things are. You are not smart enough. You are not disciplined enough. You are not the kind of person who succeeds at things like that. You are too old, too late, too far behind, too damaged by what happened, too shaped by where you came from, too much the person that you have always been to become someone fundamentally different now. That is the lie. And it is destroying your life with the specific efficiency of something you have invited inside and given permanent residence to, something you defend without realizing you are defending it, something you mistake every single day for self-awareness instead of recognizing it for what it actually is, a story, a constructed, chosen, renewable, completely replaceable story about who you are and what you are capable of. Tony Robbins has spent more than 4 decades standing in front of human beings, millions of them, from every background, every nationality, every configuration of advantage and disadvantage, and trauma and privilege that the human condition produces, and in watching them discover in real time that the version of themselves they have been living inside is not the only version available. What you are about to understand will not just change how you see yourself. It will change what you believe is possible for the rest of your life. Stay with me. Her name was Diana, 41 years old, a middle school teacher in Phoenix, Arizona, a woman who by every external measure was living a decent, functional, respectable life. She had a job she was good at, a small house she owned, 2 kids who loved her and needed her and depended on her with the complete, uncomplicated trust that children give to the parent who shows up. And she was drowning. Not in any way that looked like drowning from the outside. She went to work every day. She attended the parent-teacher
Meetings and the school plays.
and the Saturday morning soccer games. She smiled when smiling was required and managed when managing was the only option, and held things together with the specific, exhausting competence of a woman who had been holding things together so long that the holding had become her entire identity. But at night, after the kids were asleep, and the house was quiet, and there was nothing left to manage and no one left to hold together, she would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and feel it, the specific, familiar, bone-deep weight of a life that was hers, and yet somehow not fully hers, a life she was living but had never quite chosen, a life that had been assembled around her by circumstance and obligation and the accumulated momentum of decisions made when she was a different person with different information. She had a dream. She had always had a dream. She wanted to write, not articles or lesson plans or emails to parents. She wanted to write a book, a novel, a real one with characters she loved, and a world she had built and a story that said something true about what it means to be a human being, navigating the impossible, beautiful, heartbreaking complexity of being alive. She had been wanting to write that book for 17 years. And in 17 years, she had written exactly 43 pages. Not because she lacked talent. The 43 pages were extraordinary. People who read them said so. Not because she lacked time. She had found time for everything else. But because every time she sat down to write, the voice arrived. Who do you think you are? What makes you think you have something worth saying? Teachers from Phoenix do not write novels. People like you do not do things like this. This is not the kind of person you are. The voice was not a stranger. It had been living inside her for as long as she could remember. It sounded like reason. It sounded like humility. It sounded like the responsible, realistic assessment of a person who understood her own limitations. It was the lie. And she had been serving it faithfully every single day, for 17 years. Let me describe the anatomy of this lie, because it is not random. It is not accidental. It is not the product of one bad experience or one cruel comment or one moment of failure that left a permanent mark. It is a system. Robbins calls it the blueprint, the internal map built in childhood, reinforced through adolescence, solidified through the repeated experiences of adulthood, that defines what you believe is possible for someone like you. It is the sum of every message you received, explicitly and implicitly, about your worth, your capacity, your place in the order of things, what you were allowed to want and what wanting too much would cost you. The messages came from parents, from teachers, from the peer group that enforced conformity with the specific social brutality that only childhood environments can produce, from the culture, from the media, from every source that had an opinion about who you should be and how far someone with your particular combination of background and ability and circumstance could reasonably expect to go. And here is the devastating efficiency of the system. You do not need anyone to keep delivering these messages once they are installed. You deliver them yourself. You become the prison guard of your own potential. You take over the job of limiting yourself so completely and so continuously that eventually the external sources become irrelevant. You have internalized the ceiling. You carry it with you, everywhere, all the time, and the ceiling feels like the sky. Robbins has sat across from people with almost no external advantages who changed their lives completely. And he has sat across from people with every external advantage who could not move an inch. The difference was never the circumstances. The difference was always the story. Tony Robbins was not born into the story he tells now. He grew up in Glendora, California, in a home that was chaotic, emotionally violent, and profoundly unstable. His mother was addicted to alcohol and prescription drugs. The home was in constant crisis. There was not enough money. There was not enough safety. There was not enough of the baseline predictability that children need to develop the foundational sense that the world is a place that can be trusted. He was 17 years old when he left home. Not to go to college, not to begin a planned next chapter. He left to escape, to survive. He was working as a janitor, living separately from his family, trying to figure out how to construct a life out of the materials available to someone with no money, no degree, no connections, and a blueprint built from 17 years of that home that told him exactly what he was and was not capable of. And then something happened. He attended a seminar by a motivational speaker named Jim Rohn, and for the first time in his life, he heard someone say something that his entire experience had not given him access to. You are not your past. You are not the product of your circumstances. You are the product of your decisions. And the most important decision you will ever make is the decision about what things mean, not what happened, what it means. Because the same event, the same childhood, the same failure, the same loss can mean you are broken, or it can mean you are equipped. It can mean the ceiling is real, or it can mean the ceiling is a story, and the story is a choice, and the choice is available right now. Robbins became obsessed. He studied psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, the mechanics of human change. He practiced on himself. He tested everything. He became, by his early 20s, one of the most sought-after performance coaches in the world. Not because he was born into it, because he made the decision, the fundamental, irreversible, identity-level decision, that the story his blueprint had written for him was not the story he was going to live. That decision is available to you, right now, in this moment, without going to a seminar, without waiting for a sign, without any external permission from anyone. The decision is yours. It has always been yours. The first lesson: your identity is not a discovery. It is a decision. Most people treat their identity like geology, like something that was formed over long periods of time by forces beyond their control and is now essentially fixed. You are who you are. Your personality was shaped by your childhood and your experiences and your neurology and the specific gravitational field of every person and circumstance that has ever touched your life. And that is partly true. You were shaped. Profoundly shaped. But shaped is not the same as determined. The clay has been worked. That does not mean it cannot be worked again. Robbins teaches that identity is the most powerful force in human psychology. Not goals. Not habits. Not strategies or systems or morning routines. Identity, because you do not rise to your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. If your identity is I am someone who struggles with discipline, every goal you set will be undermined by the story that precedes it. If your identity is I am someone who figures things out, that story becomes a self-fulfilling engine of persistence and resilience that no external obstacle can permanently stop. Diana eventually came to one of Robbins' events. And he asked her a simple question. Not what do you want? Not what is your goal? He asked her, who are you? And she said what most people say. She described her roles, her circumstances, her history. She described in careful detail the product of her blueprint. And he said, no, I did not ask what happened to you. I asked who you are. And that is a question only you can answer. And until you answer it, deliberately and until you choose the identity instead of inheriting it, you will keep living inside someone else's answer. She sat with that for 2 days. And on the second day, she wrote something in her journal that she had never written before. Not Diana the teacher. Not Diana the mother. Not Diana. The product of everything that had been done to her and everything she had been told. She wrote, I am a writer. 3 words, present tense, unconditional, not I want to be, not I am trying to be, I am. And everything changed. The second lesson, the story you tell is the life you build. Robbins has a phrase he has repeated across 4 decades and in front of millions of people. The quality of your life is the quality of your communication, starting with the communication you have with yourself. Most of us talk to ourselves in ways we would never tolerate from another person, with a contempt and a dismissiveness and a certainty about our own limitations that, if it came from a partner or a colleague, would end the relationship. We narrate our failures with precision and our successes with hesitation. We catalog what went wrong and minimize what went right. We speak to ourselves in a voice that was formed in our most vulnerable years by people who were doing their best and were, in many cases, not doing nearly well enough. And we call this voice realism. We call it humility. We protect it from examination by labeling it self-awareness. It is not self-awareness. Self-awareness would let you see the voice from the outside. Self-awareness would let you ask, is this voice accurate? Is this voice serving me? Is this the voice I would choose if I were choosing? You can change the voice, not by silencing it. Resistance does not work that way. By building a new one, deliberately, with practice, with the same patience and repetition that built the original voice over years and decades. The new voice does not need to feel true immediately. It only needs to be chosen. And the choosing, repeated with consistency, becomes the feeling. The feeling becomes the belief. The belief becomes the action. The action becomes the life. The third lesson, emotion is the engine. Choose your fuel. Robbins discovered something early in his work that neuroscience has since confirmed. Human beings do not act on logic. We act on emotion. Every decision you have ever made, every relationship you entered or left, every job you took or abandoned, every risk you took or avoided, was ultimately driven not by rational calculation, but by the emotional state you were in when you made it. And emotional states are not things that happen to you. They are things you produce, through your body, through your breathing, through the stories you tell, through the questions you ask, through the physiology you inhabit. Robbins became famous and was dismissed by many serious people for this very reason, for moving on stages and making large physical gestures and asking audiences to stand and breathe differently and change the state of their bodies before they could change the state of their minds. And it looked like theater. It looked like manipulation. It looked like the farthest possible thing from serious psychology. And it worked. It worked because it was not theater. It was physiology. Because your body is not just the vehicle for your mind. Your body is the primary input into your emotional state. Change the body and you change the chemistry. Change the chemistry and you change the access you have to the version of yourself that is capable, resourceful, clear, and ready. You are not at the mercy of your emotions. You are the producer of them. And producing a different emotion is the first step to making a different decision and building a different life. The fourth lesson, the meaning you assign is the power you carry. Everything that has happened to you, every loss, every failure, every injustice, every moment that broke something in you that you were not sure could be repaired, means exactly what you decide it means. Not because reality is arbitrary, not because the pain was not real or the damage was not genuine, but because meaning is not something events carry inherently. Meaning is something humans assign.
And the assignment is a choice.
And the choice has consequences that extend across the entire remaining length of your life. Robbins had a childhood They could have meant, and by every statistical probability should have meant, that he became a person defined by what had been done to him. Every metric suggested the story would end before it got interesting. And instead he assigned a meaning that was not given. He decided that the chaos and the instability and the insufficiency of his beginning had given him something, had built in him an engine that comfortable beginnings do not produce, had made him the person who could stand in front of millions of people who were suffering and say, I know what it is to have nothing and believe you are nothing and choose. Anyway, to build. What did your struggle give you? Not what did it take. What did it give? What did it build in you that would not exist if the path had been easier? That question is the beginning of a different meaning. And a different meaning is the beginning of a different life. 6 months after Diana wrote those 3 words in her journal, I am a writer, she had 90 pages. Not 43, 90, written before school. Written after the kids were in bed. Written in the 20-minute windows between obligations that she had always had and had always used for scrolling and had now began using for the thing that mattered. She told me something in an email that I want you to hear. She said, the book is not finished. It may never be published. But I am a completely different person than I was a year ago, not because my circumstances changed. They are almost identical. Same job, same house, same kids, same Phoenix. But I changed how I see myself. And when I changed how I saw myself, I changed what I believed I was allowed to do. And when I changed what I believed I was allowed to do, I started doing it. I want you to hear that. Really hear it. The circumstances did not change. She changed. And she changed because she made a decision. The same decision that is available to you right now in this moment. In the life you are actually living, with the circumstances you actually have. Robbins says there is a defining moment in every person's life where they stop waiting for the world to give them permission to be who they were meant to be, where they stop measuring their possibility by the evidence of their past, where they finally, fully, irreversibly understand that the identity they have been living inside is not a cage that was built around them, but a story that was written before. They knew they had the pen, and then they pick up the pen. That moment can be right now. It does not require a seminar, or a crisis or a breakdown or a loss that finally makes the question undeferrable. It requires only the willingness, the specific, quiet, completely private willingness, to look at the story you have been living inside and ask whether it is true, not whether it happened, whether it is true about who you are and what is possible for the rest of your life, because the rest of your life has not happened yet. It is still being written, you are still writing it right now, in this moment, with every choice you make about what things mean and who you are and what you are going to do with the time that remains. Pick up the pen. Here is what I want you to do before this day is over. Find a quiet place, not a performative place, not somewhere public where the act of writing will feel like a statement, somewhere private, somewhere honest. And write 3 words, not what you want to be, not what you are working toward, not the goal or the aspiration or the intention, who you are, present tense, the identity you are choosing to inhabit from this moment forward, the version of yourself that the best of your life will be built on. I am a writer. I am a builder. I am someone who figures things out. I am a person who shows up. I am someone who is not defined by what happened to me, but by what I choose to do with what I have been given. Write it. Speak it out loud. Let the words exist in the air, rather than just inside you, where the old story has been living and then not someday. Today, do one small thing that the person you just named would do. 1 paragraph, 1 phone call, 1 healthy meal, 1 honest conversation, 1 act of discipline that is small enough to be possible and significant enough to be real, because identity is not built in dramatic gestures. It is built in the accumulation of small, consistent acts that prove to yourself, one day at a time, that the new story is true, that the person you named is the person you actually are. Robbins has stood in front of 3 million people live in his career. He has heard every story, every version of I cannot, every articulation of why this particular person, in this particular situation, with this particular history, is the exception to the rule, the one for whom this does not apply, the one whose circumstances are genuinely too difficult, whose past is genuinely too present, whose ceiling is genuinely too real to be questioned. And he has watched, thousands of times, the moment when that person decides it is not true, when the story breaks open and something else, something older and more essential and completely undefeated by everything that has been done to it, steps forward. Calls it the breakthrough, not a metaphor, a literal breaking through the ceiling that was never the sky. Your breakthrough is not behind you. It is not something that happened to other people in other circumstances, with other resources. It is the next decision you make, the next story you choose to tell about who you are, the next moment you pick up the pen that has always been in your hand. You are not the lie you have been living. You never were. You are the person on the other side of the story. The person who was always there, waiting, patient, undefeated. You have always been that person. It's time to live like it. Write the 3 words. Today. If this changed something in how you see yourself, even slightly, even just the beginning of a crack in the ceiling, share it with the person you know is living inside a story that is not serving them. Subscribe for more content that does not just inspire you to feel better, it invites you to be different. And tell me in the comments, what are your 3 words? Write them. Right now. In the comments. Let them exist somewhere outside you.